what have you been able to learn from each other and, from working with the different law enforcement departments throughout this process?
As this process has really developed over the last few months, just the fact that we're talking about it more in big groups, not just amongst the silo that we live in, which is education, community primary care, pain management. We're hearing everybody else's perspectives who are all on the same side of trying to treat the problem, but we were working at it in different manners, and to be able to bring to bear what we're learning from one another helps a lot. It gives us a different perspective on what we're trying to accomplish.
Great.
I think it's been fascinating to see what all else is happening out in the community, because I always get just the view of the exam room with the patient in front of me, and the reality is that there's no singular solution that's applicable to every single person that's in front of us, because they all have a unique set of circumstances and medical conditions and things like that we need all of us in this community to work on.
What I'm learning is a broader array of facts. Listening to the law enforcement, the legal people, I'm learning and seeing the specifics as to what's happening around the deaths. And I'm seeing this isn't just an opiate crisis, it's a benzodiazepine mixed with alcohol opiate crisis. And that combination is something we have to combat quite a bit. I don't want people just to be focused on opiates, but there's a lot of unhealthful things they're doing. And sure, opiates are something, I'm glad that gets the attention. And so learning from the law enforcement how they're coming at this, and then some of the issues. It's very striking when you hear that so many of the crimes committed are surrounding these issues. It makes us have conversations with patients and let them know, you may not be a criminal, but there's things that are coming around this. And so we've got to minimize these situations, so we've got to keep a tighter lock on this. And then also talking to the primary care physicians and always being reminded that they're pain physicians. They may not be full-time pain physicians, but there's a lot of different aspects to this. And so I've appreciated the conversation. It's tragic that it took a loss of one of our own to really initiate this.
Okay, thank you. How about from you two?
So it is a tragedy that every death that we come across is pretty much preventable. So when we get together and we have forums where we sit down and we talk about strategy and that kind of thing, it's really something unprecedented here in St. Joseph County. So we're able to share ideas. Dr. Graham was a huge loss for this community. He was my doctor. So that was a turning point, I think, for everybody to get together, and not just Dr. Graham, but everyone else who has tragically died that could have been, their deaths could have been prevented, from the Savage brothers to everybody in between. So sharing those experiences and sharing those concerns, they're not just off doing their own thing and we're not off doing our own thing. We're actually collaborating together to try to come up with a solution that'll actually benefit the community.
Every death is avoidable. We just didn't know how to do it. We didn't know how to do it very well. We in law enforcement, I'm always putting people in jail, holding them accountable, but not really understanding how they got there in the first place. Hearing from all the different disciplines in the medical field gives me a better perspective of what do we do about this person. When 85% of our property crimes are committed by folks who have those issues, we have to do better. When we have 59 people who die every year, we have to do better. And by hearing from our medical providers, I think we're able to do so.
Okay, great. And just one more question, moving forward now, is there anything you think we missed in our coverage that you think is important for people to know?
You have a Michiana audience. A lot of what we're talking about is Indiana. As one who practices in Michigan and Indiana, it's kind of sad that there's not as much momentum going on in Michigan. It's surprising to me that when I talk to my Kalamazoo and Battle Creek physicians, they don't even know there was a guy shot
Really?
in South Bend because it's so far away. It's across that border. Maybe there's a wall, I don't know. But it's just strange that I wish there was a little more Michigan emphasis, the Michiana.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's your fault. But you do have a broad spectrum where you cover. I mean, this is going to be seen in Michigan as well.
Yeah. So do you think there's ways moving forward that we can keep covering this in a way that's helpful for the community? What are the types of things that you'd like to see? More Michigan?
I think periodic checkbacks, like how are
Yeah.
we doing? You know, what's the opiate death rate looking like now? You know, there's this kind of negative focus or light on it too, and maybe look at some of the positives of, you know, this many people are getting treatment. We collected this many pounds of medications, the last pill drop, so that, because I think the positivity of that will show not only that we're making real progress, but we'll continue to energize people instead of having it kind of just smolder out.
Okay, great.
Sarah, I would also want there to be an emphasis on, is pain being managed? Because if you see a spike in suicides, I don't know if we're accomplishing
Yeah.
much. And there's a reason why Kevorkian was very successful in Michigan and elsewhere in the country, but he's a Michigan guy. And we don't want there to be a message that say we're not going to aggressively go after pain. We're going to aggressively go after pain. But there's more than just one tool.
Yeah.
We don't have to be little Johnny one note and all we do is write opiates. There's a lot more to it. So I'd like to see that emphasis on, are we neglecting pain management by pushing the anti-opiate mode?
Okay, that's a
And
great idea.
I can't believe I'm going to say this, but showing some success stories, those who have actually had the addiction, able to tackle it, and how they're doing now. What are they doing? How is their life different, not just for themselves, but also their family, their friends? I think we deal a lot of times in the horrible part of the criminal justice system. Sometimes it's nice to be able to see that there can be a difference.
Yeah.
The flip side of that is to pull in other, what we call social determinants of health. You know, what are the reasons that a person is addicted? You know, why isn't every story going to end up rosy? Well, they don't have a place to live, and they don't have a job, and they can't get a job because they don't have a computer, and they can't put together a CV. And there's all sorts of other social things in our community that we can be working on that are kind of outside the opioid epidemic per se. And even to think back to what Dr. Drew said about this Indiana-Michigan divide, depending how political you want to wade into this, you know, you could have some people saying, well, maybe it's not a problem in Michigan because they have medical marijuana in Michigan. I mean, you really legitimately could have people who think that maybe that's why there's not a problem there. And whether you want to have a story turn on this particular thing, which is certainly being bantered about in our state, you know, you can find some probably pretty good data that shows, you know, that's not why we're not talking about it in Michigan, that's not really
Yeah.
solving their pain problem in the state of Michigan.
Okay, great.
Now they're finding marijuana laced with fentanyl,
Mhm.
so that's a problem.
Really?
That's true.
Oh
I don't
my
get that.
gosh.
Or cocaine.
Yeah.
How could that be
Hey,
cheaper?
marijuana?
Well, that's what they're claiming. I don't do anything but
How?
marijuana.
That's.
There's definitely a story there about medical marijuana and what its role is in chronic pain or isn't a
Is there
role
a
in
role?
chronic pain,
Mhm.
and how that can be also, you get a little bit of that laced with a bit of something else, and all of a sudden you want more of that batch of marijuana.
Yeah.
I think there's the other issue too of, I'm not sure these are people, the people that are dying, there may be addicts, there's no doubt there's addicts, but there's also a lot of people who are recreationally playing with it and are criminals. And I wonder if there's stories about, look what happened to the Savages. Were they addicts? I don't think so. I think they made a mistake. It takes one time to do that when you're playing with meds that are just not safe. So I think you're doing a good job by highlighting the fact that these aren't safe medications. It's just like a sharp knife is useful in a surgery, but you don't want to have that, you don't want to run with it.
But there
That's
are
perfect,
success
yeah.
stories too. I mean, we don't want to keep
Yeah.
bantering on the negative, even though that's, you know, applicable. But about a year ago, I was in a restaurant, and a girl came up to me, she said, "You remember me?" And I said, "I don't remember you." And she said, "You saved my life. I got off heroin, and I just wanted to thank you," and gave me a hug and stuff. And that was like one of the greatest things that ever happened to me. I was like,
Wow.
wow, that's really great. So success stories like that, there are people whose lives are saved by first responders and actually get into treatment programs and actually do get clean. Unfortunately, there are too many that don't. And,
I think the useful story too of the opiates being used as a bridge. There's a time that they have a role, and then there's a time to move off them. And I think that does happen. At least I have a number of patients who've done that. But they needed it during a time when we had to work them up and do the other treatments.
And most addicts that I see are people that are addicted clearly, but they just continue to get high daily because they don't want to be dope sick. Dope sick is like the worst flu times 1,000, where you just can't control yourself. You have these cramps that just feel like your bones are breaking.
Yeah.
And so for them, it's just maintaining their functionality. I mean, that's what they do to get through their day. They really want to be cured, but they don't want to go through
It takes
that.
over. It takes
Yeah.
over them. And
Yeah.
they can't make good decisions at that point.
Yeah, and when you see that, you know it. You know, you see people down in the county jail that are in detox, and it's just really, it's pretty disgusting. I mean, you just, it's sad to see a human being actually at that level, you know, where they're just so gone and lost that they can't
Yeah.
control anything. Use your imagination, but yeah.
I think that's great. That was perfect. I love all those ideas. Is there anything else that anyone would like to add?
I think the idea of balance, oftentimes the patients don't think that there's a risk with opiates, and we'll go over interventional things which are not very risky. Oh, I don't want to have a needle put in me. I don't want to have any of this done, but I'm going to do this risky procedure. I'm going to do this risky medication. And so I think that it's helpful when you have a media outlet that can describe, here's risk with medications. There are real risks. And there's other options that you have that have risks too, but they're not anywhere near approaching the risks that you take with these medications that we'll continue to use, but I think that that balance is hard for us to get that message out.
Okay. All right. I think we're good. Thank you all so much. This was great.
Thank you.